Welcome to Knowledge Cast. This is a look into the world of knowledge management, information management, data management, artificial intelligence, and everything in between. This is brought to you by Enterprise Knowledge. I'm Zach Wahl, founder and CEO of EK. And today, I am not going to be leading this session. With us, we've got Paco Nathan, who is a real friend of the firm and personal friend. And he's also a principal DevRel engineer at Senzing. And Paco is going to be leading Joe, Lulit, and I through a conversation around our new book. So Paco, over to you.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you very much. And so good to see you. I'm glad to join you here on the podcast. And first and foremost, congratulations. I know the book is coming out very soon, but I'm super thrilled about this. Just to start things off, when is your release date? I know this podcast may be coming out afterwards, but just to give people a sense of where we're at.
Amazon tells us it will be available the second week in May, and our publisher Springer seems to say the same thing. So 2 data sources. Can we trust it? Let's hope so.
Alrighty. Well, so to start things off, the title of the new book is Bridging Knowledge, Data, and AI. And the subtitle goes into semantic layer. I know you're exploring here about practices in semantic layer. What was the main motivation? I mean, what was really driving you to go after this topic area?
Yeah, so Lulit was the one that pushed us on this. So Lulit, I think we've got a story to tell here. Why don't you lead us off?
Yeah, it's gosh, it feels like a long time ago now.
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago. So Paco, this kind of dates back actually, and I would like to think this weaves in a lot of our very many different careers that we've had between Zach, Joe, and I.
Yeah.
In terms of, Zach coming from the taxonomy world, Joe search and information architecture, and then myself establishing our graph practice and our ontology team, building that team over the last decade. And there was a moment in time, I would say, inflection point in around 2018, 2019 timeframe, when we started seeing a lot of the problems that we're trying to solve are actually created by all these artificial silos that these disciplines have created. And we've been doing these things and different solutions for different things. And that's when we started talking about, geez, this is like, if we weave it all together, the taxonomy, the ontology, the graph, all these glossaries, that's when we started creating this semantic layer that brings it all together. So we've been doing a lot of the work without calling it that for some time now. And we said, and Zach inspired the book idea. Why don't we write about it? So that's how it all started. And here we are about 1.5 years later in the writing process.
I think one of the things that really compels me about the book in particular is the wealth of different customer case studies and examples and experiences in different areas. I guess it's fair to say semantic layer, it's not a one size fits all. It's not like you just pull a product off a shelf and plug it in. It would be correct in saying that this is a very rich practice area and you have to understand the business.
I would say very much so. I mean, this is where I think you're seeing it too, right? You've noted it on LinkedIn. All of a sudden, everybody's talking about semantic layers. And I think that right now, what we hope the book accomplishes, and Paco, again, this is where I thank you for writing the foreword to it. You can be the judge of this as well. That we're not just talking about how to build a semantic layer. We're talking about why to build a semantic layer, what the business outcomes of that are. And to me, that's the missing link here. If this just becomes another technology pursuit, another thing to design, another thing for an organization to manage administrative burden around, then it's going to be a wasted effort. But if we can truly link this to the outcomes for the organization, to the return on investment, then I think this is a real game changer. And largely one could say the same thing for AI in general, right? So what we tried to do, and it's the fourth section of the book, It's really all about the case studies. And as Lulit said, we've been doing this since before the term semantic layer was really a thing, before we even knew that semantic layers were what we would end up calling all of this. And so we've been able to pull on a lot of different stories that even predate this most recent AI revolution, if you will.
One thing that strikes me is that given how many different enterprise organizations are talking about this need and the impact of this practice, have you run across organizations that actually had a dedicated leadership specifically for addressing this problem? Because it seems like it's a problem that inherently crosses silos. In some ways, a lot of organizations have missed the fact that they were creating walls internally.
I can jump in, and Joe, you've lived one of these.
Yeah,
so
Joe smiling.
I would say, Paco, we literally are going through one right now with one organization, going through a good kind of reorg, and we have witnessed two in the past 3 years as a result of an initiative showing a semantic layer initiative, showing and value on solving a business problem. One of the financial institutions that that we work with is a good example of this, where the initiatives has started kind of growing into these tentacles of bringing in different business units up to, I would say at this point we've reached 10. And when we started reaching around the 8th time the business unit group, then they said the managing director realized that there's something here and they need to make this a strategic capability for the whole firm. So that led to our counterparts who was the semantic layers liaison being promoted into a position, a managing director, now became a direct line to the CEO strategic initiatives, which is they are now in the process of expanding it to different parts of their global offices. So they have representatives they're directly hiring for. So a team of 2 when we started back in 2022 is now a team of 8 because they have seen this as a strategic direction that the firm is taking. We have a very similar story, another one with a firm we work with in the Middle East, in that part of the world as well. And now we're supporting one in Australia.
Oh, fantastic.
And just to pull on one of those, it's particularly interesting that the last one Lulit just mentioned, the person running this program started out pretty junior in the organization. But as he was given this, at the time, maybe questionable program to build a quote-unquote semantic layer, that program kept showing more and more value to the point where he has now subsumed ownership over all data within the organization. So as the organization has realized the greater value of semantic layer, it's also meaning that these individuals are getting their direct line to the COO and even higher because of how important the program has become. I just think that's remarkable. I mean, this is all happening so quickly, but to see a complete organization changing as a result of it is pretty exciting. Sorry, Joe, I stepped on your toes there. Not the last time.
Two thoughts on that. The first is we are getting to see our clients getting promoted. The ones that are taking a chance with this are getting promoted.
Yeah.
And then Zach talked about something else we're seeing a lot more of, which is data, content, AI, knowledge is moving all under the COO.
Oh, okay.
Organizations are looking for one place to centralize this, and there's a real trend these days to say, where can we put it? Okay. Who sees everything? And we're seeing it at our clients. We're seeing it talked about on places like LinkedIn and others, that the best place to start to put this source of information that cuts across so many different areas is the COO. And I think that says a lot about what all of us are doing right now.
COO operations, this means it's strategic, it's prioritized. This is crucial for the business. They're going to invest in it. This is not just a one and done kind of thing.
Well, exactly right. And there's somebody that grew up in the knowledge management world, KM in particular, was always fighting for legitimacy, always looking for the budget, always looking for the ROI. And having knowledge management wrapped up as part of the semantic layer all of a sudden propels the executive interest in this field that has often been easily expendable when organizations hit tough times. Now turning it into the thing that makes AI work, I would say that's a moment.
Right. Well, and it's meeting this critical need because so many organizations are grappling with vague definitions of AI and all these promises of capabilities, but then they run, headfirst in this wall where if you don't have your data and your context in order, your data and your content, I should say, in order, you're not going to make a lot out of all the capabilities that are being offered. One thing I'd really like to ask about more, though, you mentioned about people who had come into this role and they started out relatively junior or early in their career, but now they're getting promoted. What's really prompting this idea that somebody could be on a fast track for promotion by embracing semantic layer and taking this throughout the organization?
Yeah, so let's be blunt about this. Read the book, and you'll get promoted. It's
okay.
It's an if then. So to me, there's a couple things here. First is I think that since this is such a new and young space, this isn't the sort of thing where tenure really matters. Seniority doesn't really matter. If you're the master of semantics at this point, you're playing an increasingly important role within the organization. So to me, that's the first piece. The second is the semantic layer is the binding fabric for the entire organization to finally realize what everybody in all of our collective fields has always wanted to do, right? I mean, gosh, I've been doing this for nearly 30 years at this point. And since day one, it was always, if only our data and our unstructured information could talk to each other. And then it was, if only these three geos could speak the same language and understand each other's stuff. If only there was a way for us to know what we didn't know. All of these if onlys are now actually achievable as reality, powered by a semantic layer. And this time period of AI and semantic layer coming together is the third bit, wherein all these organizations are falling over each other in order to get value out of AI. We all know a lot of them are spending a massive sums of money and yet struggling to find that value. So if semantic layer is the unlock for value, organizational value from AI, that's the third piece of this. You put all those things together, this truly, to me, we're seeing it is the career accelerator for a lot of folks that have maybe historically fought for budget or fought to justify their small pilot programs. Now it's the you can fix these massive enterprise issues that we've been dealing with for a very long time.
Thinking about this, Paco, you mentioned why do people with a lot more tenure not get into this? I think tenure might be a disadvantage. This is a new way of thinking.
Okay. Interesting.
You're saying this to a guy who's been doing this for 40 years, Joe. Tread carefully.
No, I agree.
I know. Well, you were in the right space where you were thinking. But it is a new way of thinking. So a lot of people that have been sitting in the data space, data warehouses, data lakes, are used to one way of solving that problem.
Right.
And now all of a sudden, all of us come out of nowhere with this totally different idea with metadata and graphs and ontologies. And the person that jumps on that is probably not the person that's been living in the data world forever.
Present company excluded.
Lulit, you probably see that more than any of us.
Well, I could imagine that if a person really is going out to understand where these problem areas are and how to cross through these different silos, it's also a fairly rapid education in what works or what doesn't work across the company. And that's going to be a lot of value to the senior executives.
Yeah. And just to add, give you a very recent example on this. One of our clients, I think we talked about coming from the unstructured data side, content, findability, like focusing on the knowledge management side. We've been working with them to establish kind of like our overarching graph for, say, financial due diligence or like all the financial services, the domain that they work in. And this is to the point of like, they took a chance of like, this is the next thing that brings it all together. And what happened over the last few months was their AI team, now, thanks to Gen AI, they have to deal with the unstructured side of the world, right, of data or content.
Right.
And they keep hitting a wall when it comes to like the RAG issues that they're having, the context issues that they're having, how to connect it with structured data, the structured, unstructured side. So they started turning to our group that's been working with our client and asking, can we use your graph? It sounds like you've already defined this. This is a very tangible like backlog of work that's coming this way, and how this individual actually, in the end, over the last couple of months, took over the data side, right? Because the business value and the core context that AI is their strategic initiative. Everyone is AI first or AI powered these days. They have the same pressure from the board. And now they turned this way and said, we need to use this graph. And here we are. He's now leading both the KM and the data teams and the analytics teams. So it's a very interesting dynamic that we're also seeing. We did not anticipate this, when we set out on this journey 2-3 years ago with this person. But that just gives you a very tangible example of where enterprises are, at least the immediate ones that I can give you anecdotally.
Well, one thing that really struck me when I was first reading through the draft of the book was how well you've mapped out the content side of this. I think that a lot of people who come out of the IT kind of background, they'll think about data and data systems and data management, and they hear the word content, they think, oh, well, that's some document. I mean, it's over there in the storage, but it's a lot more impact. I mean, there's realistically, in most of these companies, there's probably a lot more content than there is data. Is that a typical case?
We have been using the statistics and said for many years, it's about 80% of an organization's collective information is unstructured. So 4 out of 5 pieces of information are content, files, documents, records, whatever you want to call them. Yeah. And so, yes, majority, vast majority. And that often historically has been where we solved problems. So when Enterprise Knowledge was created back in 2013, we were a KM shop that knew search and knew content strategy and governance. And it wasn't until Lulit showed up that we really started exploring the data side. So I think because we were that unstructured first company, we have a pretty significant leg up in today's world. And it's been fun to see those worlds further mashing together as a result. I mean, even the definition of KM, we are really proud of how we've helped it evolve. But at this point, I'm a really big fan of just kind of rattling them all off, right? You got content management, document management, records management, data management, information management. I mean, it all matters. This is why in the book we introduced the term knowledge assets, because we got really tired of saying your content and your data and your people and your this and your that, right? Like in an AI first world, powered by a semantic layer, the structure of your stuff matters a lot less than the nature of it, than the quality of it, than the context of it. And so if we're in a place where we're in the business of uniting all of an organization's assets, then why not have a single word to describe all that stuff? Or I suppose two single words: knowledge asset.
Yeah. Fantastic term for that.
Thank you.
And I think one question I have is, in terms of these assets, we're not just talking about text. Also, there's probably a lot other kinds of media. There's video, audio. What else are people working with these days to meet the needs of the AI tooling that's coming in?
So it's anything in a digital form, but it's actually also more than that. And the way that you can think about it is, it's anything that you can effectively apply metadata to as a knowledge asset, anything that is a container of knowledge. And so from that definition, Paco, you're a knowledge asset.
Okay.
Within Senzing, you are a knowledge asset. You could be tagged as having expertise in particular topics and experience working with certain clients in certain industries, and you can be incorporated into the network. And so you play this out, and it's really cool to think about, right? Somebody goes and they look for a piece of information and they get the short answer, maybe Gen AI summarized answer, and they want to go deeper. And now they can go deeper by having an automatically assembled deeper answer. They can go and look at a data artifact or a content artifact, or they can go and find you and learn from you, or find a community practice that you have participated in and interact with other experts, or go sign up for a class. There's all these different types of, again, knowledge assets that are connectable in such a way that, yes, they can create new knowledge and new answers, but that they can also create a choose your own adventure path for any operator or individual within the organization. So products are knowledge assets, the buildings, the pieces of equipment, really anything that is a container of knowledge and is taggable is in and of itself a knowledge asset and can be connected to the graph.
Like, I love this definition of knowledge asset, the richness, the elegance of it, because, I think that over the years we've been conditioned to think of machine capabilities, machine learning, etc., in the sense of a Google search, and that people have a magic 8-ball, you just shake it, it gives you the answer, you're done. But what you're describing here is a knowledge asset that encompasses, like you're saying, the product, all the operations, the practices, the decisions that have been made. It brings me back to really the problem of defining what is AI. Because we are hearing a lot more that we've got some magic 8-ball that's going to provide AI. Just go ahead and sign up for the subscription and pay a lot of money. What you're talking about here, though, is I would still go back to this definition that I'd used before. I think I mentioned in the forward, of teams of people and machines collaborating. And through that collaboration, you get this enhanced capability that you'd never get from an individual, whether it's an individual expert or an individual magic 8-ball. It's really mapping out that teamwork and where the dynamics of those relationships are. I don't know, is that, am I off the mark there, or is that kind of what you're seeing?
I would say absolutely. I think one of the biggest shifts that I don't think it's subtle anymore, is the organizations planning for how to co-work with AI. Mm-hmm. And really, this is an active conversations that we're seeing in operating models, the human AI relationship, and where the role of the humans comes in, and then where the machines go in, and also it goes vice versa, right? We're no longer just building solutions for humans. We are also being conscious of being solutions for machines. The distinction is very visible in that humans need intuitive things to react to or with, and then machines need granular things that have context and explainability behind them, or at least they should. That's where I stand on that side of the line. But this is exactly the boardroom topic right now, with especially AI governance topics, and how you bring in data, knowledge, governance, and semantics as the middle kind of connective tissue to figure that relationship between humans and machines. So there's that aspect of it. And then to your point about maybe productivity or efficiency, we are already seeing it. How we develop semantics has significantly evolved. Before, you would need to talk to SMEs for a long time to understand the top-down approach, but now you can expedite a lot of it with AI as your colleague.
Right.
And we have what we call our semantic assistant, right? Mm-hmm. Pulls out what you can, and then now you go into the human validation, the human as the validator, the yes or no sayer, as opposed to spending a lot of time up front trying to understand their universe. So it's kind of like this symbiotic relationship of using AI to expedite our work and make our lives easier, but also AI needs semantics and KM and context to be successful. I don't know if that starts getting into where you're getting at, Paco, but that's what we're seeing.
Lulit, what was the number that we heard last week during the knowledge share? One of our clients, X process used to take them how many days, and then we engineered it down to, do you know what I'm talking about? Trying to prompt you without naming the client.
I know, I'm trying to think about it. There are two that come to mind. But I think one was significantly like a 12-hour process into like a couple of hours with just a pilot, by the way, not like even that has not even gone through multiple fine-tuning and iterations.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is getting to 85% accuracy in responses. RAG, naive RAG or basic RAG versus graph RAG.
Okay.
These are just like simple anecdotal examples, but like very powerful, that are getting these projects funded to move into these semantic layer projects funded to move into the operationalization and scale levels.
Yeah, I think, Zach, the one I'm remembering was it was the production of a report in a financial services organization that took 21 days and was trimmed to 15 minutes.
Wow.
There you go. That's the one.
That's a good number.
That's fantastic. Quarter of an hour.
That is efficiency.
That 2 orders of magnitude. Just astounding. So this is interesting, because what I'm hearing then, I'll play this back and see if it fits. Semantic layer is really articulating, developing these relationships, the context about your business, whether it's the people or the processes or equipment, etc. But understanding how to really leverage that network in the context of your business. And bottom line is, you probably could have done it before. It would have taken you a lot longer, and it would have been a lot more expensive. And so now it is a lot of a kind of a time dimension of synchronizing, coordinating all the different elements and getting them to work together more effectively. Is that kind of a gist of it?
Spot on. And I actually think this is really critical. As you say, like, the individual components of the semantic layer, I mean, business glossary, metadata, taxonomy, ontology, knowledge graph, these are not new, right? Yeah. Some are newish, but they've been around for a while, and we actually lay this out in the book. A, it's the combination of them, but B, it's the reusability of them for the enterprise, right? So within the book, we talk about the semantic layer and then semantic layer powered applications. And the key is that a single semantic layer, well-designed, invested in at the enterprise level, can result in a myriad of semantic layer-powered applications. It can be internal, external chatbots. It can be graph-powered search. It can be the Gen AI that actually works accurately without hallucinating. It can be all these different things. And most organizations are evolving so quickly that you don't even know. They don't even know what use case is going to be next. But if you get the semantic layer right, then you don't need to know what the next semantic layer powered application is going to be a year down the line that's going to maybe change their business. They won't need to start from scratch. They'll have the foundation to be able to implement it much faster.
Right. It's this reuse and leverage that's so important. You're making an investment up front, but you get to reuse this so many times. And importantly, you get to reuse it in the ways that are unanticipated, unknown now.
Yes.
And so in a way, you're kind of solving for those unknowns, which is so crucial, embracing the uncertainty of business.
Which is pretty fun, too, is like, I mean, we've talked about Agile for years. We've talked about being flexible, but you were always limited by the technical foundations and frankly, the semantic foundations of your organization. And so to think that we are on the precipice of this place and are now actively realizing it for a lot of different organizations, that you don't have to know where you need to be in a year. You don't have to know how the economy is going to change or what the geopolitics are going to tell you or what whiz-bang new product is going to get launched. You're going to know your organization. It's going to be speaking the same language. It's going to be connected. It's just going to make any future change so much easier to address quickly and correctly.
I mean, for instance, as a tangible case, I was recently talking with friends at a large, well-known organization. They were starting out on this path. We were talking at a high level, and we brought in some of the engineers who were working on it and showing how they were doing an LLM integration and how they were training because of their graph RAG solution. The core of it, the place where they started out, though, was they had one source that defined their KPIs. And these are the KPIs that were used in operations. They were used by finance. They were used by legal, all across the board. They had to, have some conformance across the organization on these KPIs. And those are the definitions that sort of from there built outwards. So, to your point, organizations have had these materials for a long time. It's just now we can use them a lot more dynamically. And I think it'll be surprising for a lot of organizations just what they really do have to leverage, how much they can get into this. Has there been a kind of a surprise factor as you're engaging with clients?
I think that's the key part, is that I think there's some sort of misconception that you're going to have to start from scratch.
Yeah.
In our whole career, we've never seen an organization that does not have one or two, if not three, of these components. To your point, they already exist within, like the components of the semantic layer. They already exist, albeit in pockets of the organization or in an MDM or somewhere shared at a conceptual level, as like product or solution taxonomies that they have on their website for retail organizations, for instance. These components exist. And the challenge, I think, has always been, at least for 5 or so years before, is the technology was harder. Being able to connect and manage semantics, through these extensible, flexible graph databases or the semantic model management solutions, standards, semantic web standards, being able to adapt, the ability to have the tools that allow you to adapt those. I think now the technology, I think this is how we open the book. Technology is no longer the problem.
Yeah.
If you really ask, like the core of it, what is the crux of it is in how we think about these silos, these artificial models, the vendor lock-in around proprietary tools. It is really like how solutions have evolved over time, how we had to improvise around these solutions. Yeah. And those organizations that are shifting from like application centric to knowledge centric or context centric or semantic models, the data about the data, are those that we're talking about right now, that are in our success stories and all the case studies in the book, as well as those that are able to have true transformations of their business from like a maturity standpoint perspective. There are semantics that are operational, that are solving specific pockets of problems. But those that are at the very right hand of the spectrum of maturity are the ones that are able to think of it through this lens.
Interesting. Yeah, I was just on this kind of tour, and I kept hearing over and over again, here's what we're building out, and ... By the way, we're reverse engineering the business logic that was locked into a particular vendor. And I mean, I think that a lot of IT vendors have had this notion of lock-in by capturing the business logic and putting it someplace proprietary. And now what you're describing is, let's reverse this. Let's deconstruct this. Let's take it from the inside out and expose what the business logic is and really leverage that.
And one more thing, because this is my soapbox. The key thing that I would add here is going back to your comment about flexibility and not anticipating questions. I'll give you an example, because sometimes the solutions we build are not. A lot of the solutions we know traditionally are built for a purpose, or you write a SQL statement to answer a very specific thing. Right? You're not building a universal model. You are building a solution to answer a specific question, or 2 or 3, and then that model keeps blowing up. If something changes, you would have to cascade all this change, all these joins, and all these queries that you've written. So hard-coded. We're actually working through a solution right now where we're helping this company transfer their 500 plus rules from like very rigid code into a graph model. And it's a very hard process for them because there's a lot of tacit knowledge in those rules, and one thing changes, where it goes from there. But where I was going with this is a recent example of an unintended flexibility. We've been working with a foundation for a few years, building out their kind of domains, like how they make funding decisions, investment decisions on specific aid programs. And they have this graph model that kind of defines these different types of decision logic, as well as some of their entities and how they're related to their projects and their funding. Last year, right around this time, if you remember, the US aid was discontinued by the government. They went away, and they had a lot of programs that they co-fund with the US government. And they had an AI team that was building out these different solutions with Claude, with Copilot, and they were trying to figure out, like, natural language, what are these programs that are co-funded with the US government that are going to be impacted with the government decommissioning US aid. And they kept hitting wrong answers, hallucinations, made up stories, all these things that were coming up through that. That came to the graph team, and they were able to answer it just like that. We did not model for that, a specific question, but because we had the relationships of funders to projects to investments to all of this, it was a very simple query to be able to surface the things that are needed so they can get to a shortlisted answer that they can act on, right? So we didn't anticipate US aid going away, for instance, but just to give you an example of a real-time value of something, the world changes, our economy changes, everything changes, but that flexibility of being able to ask the questions you did not anticipate for is a really core value.
Well, and Paco, that's one example on the front end of how much more flexible you have to go find things, right, because the graph paradigm is just more natural. It fits with what we do. But if you look on the back end, this is, in many cases, it's the map to where all the information sources are. What happens when one changes? You know, in the old days, well, that means I have to change all my ETL scripts, and I have to figure out who wrote these, and I have to write all this stuff, and I have all this work I have to do to find out, and there's probably some developer somewhere that actually knew how to do this. What if it was just mapped out in the graph? And that's a lot of what happens here is the graph says where to point. And if you are pointing at point A and point A changes to point B, change the graph. And now all of a sudden, all the things that are dependent on it change dynamically with it. And that takes that dependency on that one person that might know how things work and makes it more machine readable and understandable.
Interesting. This is bringing open, this area of practice of semantic layer is bringing open a lot more capabilities across the organization in a way. How can I put this? If I were to roll the clock back to, Lulit, you mentioned like 2018 as kind of an inflection point. If I were to roll back to, say, 2017, thinking about machine learning applications being deployed, there might be some operational practice, MLOps, et cetera. There might be a governance committee, like if a model is giving the wrong answers, the governance committee has to step in. What you're describing, though, is such a dramatically different world, because now instead of having your governance committee and your ops team looking at a particular model, instead now you're looking at a map of the whole organization. And I can imagine it's not just your MLOps team that's responding, it's HR, procurement, your attorneys, the people who really have that depth of knowledge, as opposed to having that expertise be funneled through the lens of, 3 or 4 hops before it finally touches a model. So it seems like this is kind of an opening up of organizations in a way.
I think very much so. And I'll give you another one, Paco, that going back to my knowledge management background, I get really excited about. I think with the semantic layer, this is the first time that you can truly map an entire organization's knowledge, which means that it's the first time you can identify the gaps in an organization's knowledge.
Nah.
So all these organizations, I mean, you know, the classic, our problem is we don't know what we don't know, or we've got experts that know that, but we haven't actually digitized that or made that knowledge explicit. To me, this is the tool that can actually identify the weak points in an organization's store of knowledge or information, if you will, and then proactively fill it. Fill it by mapping people demographics to what they should know about, to when they might be retiring or leaving the organization, and targeting the right people to get information from. Or fill it by looking at the entire landscape of content and data and recognizing that people are asking questions in search or questions through the chatbot that are unanswerable, and then going to fill those answers in ways that leverage the knowledge of the experts and leverage the knowledge that is maybe not yet made explicit. There's all these different techniques to this. What we do with the understanding is a whole nother probably hours worth of conversation. But this opportunity to finally say to an organization, yeah, we're gonna help you fill your gaps before you have them. That is so cool.
I'm so excited about that. I mean, that is another area of AI, if we use the term broadly, which I feel is just so underexplored. And yet we have great tooling. We have reinforcement learning. We have all kinds of graph algorithms. Exploring where the gaps are and then trying to figure out how to fill that proactively. This is the kind of, well, we would call it abductive reasoning back in the old days of AI. But this is the kind of of fill in the blanks that I always felt that generative AI was really going to fulfill a big promise. And I'm showing my age because these were discussions from the early to mid 80s, but now we're making it real.
And that's the key. We've been talking about this stuff for so long, right? Like the phrase that I've been using since I was in my 20s was, wouldn't it be cool if?
Well, that was just 10 years ago.
And to me, it's like that. But the wouldn't it be cool if moments are like now. Like we can actually do this stuff.
Yeah.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
KnowledgeCast is brought to you by Enterprise Knowledge, the world's largest dedicated knowledge management consultancy. From training to benchmarks, strategy, design, prototyping, and all the way to enterprise-level implementations, Enterprise Knowledge wants to be your services partner. Spanning the fields of knowledge management, knowledge graphs, data, learning, advanced content management, and enterprise artificial intelligence, contact us at info@enterprise-knowledge.com to discuss how we can support you.
Now, one thing I wanted to bring out in our discussion here was about the practice, the pragmatics in the book. I mean, I've had the privilege of being in the room when you're working with customers with senior leadership at particularly mission critical applications for large customers. I've had the privilege of seeing you all in action and seeing how methodical, how you step people through the process and have them understand visually and get on the same page before they really decide, like, what are our next steps. But I also really saw this in the book. So could you talk through a little bit of your thinking about how this is presented? I know there's a lot of infographics and steps that are defined, but how are you leading people through in the book to understand what they need to do or where they need to identify areas that need work?
Yeah, I'll lead off with the basic structure here, and then Lulit, I will turn things to you to get into the nitty gritty. But basically, the book is divided into 5 sections. The first is about the definition and value of the semantic layer. I actually think it's kind of ironic, right, that we're talking about semantics. We're talking about words and their definitions, and yet the term semantic layer is a little beat up already. So we're trying to make that very clear.
Yeah.
The second section is about the components, the ones that I read off before: knowledge assets and metadata, taxonomy, ontology, knowledge graph, business glossary. The third section is methodology, and this is the real meat of the book, the step-by-step of how to actually design, build, implement, sustain. The fourth is case studies. We already talked about that. And then the fifth is the semantic layer's role in AI, which, again, we started writing this book like 2 years ago. So even in that time frame, that probably would have been chapter 1 if we were where we are now, but that just shows you a lot. So Lulit, over to you for a little bit more meat on those bones.
Yeah. So Paco, I think in some of our shared projects, you may have seen this too. The biggest challenge for semantic layer is around helping a layperson understand, without saying taxonomies and ontologies, these abstract concepts in real business terms. So that's why we start the methodology with what business problem are we looking to solve? And then even when you start there, it's kind of a funnel, right? Like there are so many of them. You're going to have to help people prioritize in light of what is the biggest bang for your buck, but also what is the optimal solution for this. Because there are some things that you can solve with simple queries that don't need to be defined into a larger organizational model. So there is that second aspect of like what are the priorities and what competency questions that you're looking for. And if you read the book, you'll start seeing these templates and these toolkits that we use to, from the top down, help business leadership understand where the biggest bang for their buck is in light of defining the initial model, to the bottom up approach of, do you have the data and the assets, the knowledge assets to answer this question? And then in this process is where we start narrowing down low complexity, high value, more stakeholder interest. There are different prioritization skills that we would use to get to those 2 or 3 challenges that you would want to solve, show value on. Because I will say 9 out of 10 times, there's a lot of pushback organizationally to go this route, primarily because of the things that we talk about. It's a mindset shift. Skill sets challenge. Engineers, especially software engineers and data engineers, are not necessarily trained to think in this way. They are more thinking in the data and software and machine engineering way, which is rightfully right for it. It's not the wrong thing, just not their way of thinking. So there's a lot of natural pushback to this way of the world. Getting access to the business is a big challenge. When it comes to, if you say semantics, there's business logic, business rules, context that you need. So this is where in chapter 3, we spend a lot of time defining the toolkits, the templates that we use, the approach, kind of enumerating the steps of how to go about getting to a successful solution. Because if you don't get that right, then it's laid out in a way that you don't get to the success stories that are in chapter 4, right? So it's kind of the core dependency of how we think about those suits. This is one of the challenges that we see now is a lot of failed projects are because of that. And when we are called on to do some cleanup or to figure out what happened, this is what we find is that there's no business problem defined, no business SMEs involved, right? It's an AI exercise or just a solution application exercise, and it's not tied to the bottom line. That's really the core of what makes this a business solution and problem.
Right.
So build it and they will come doesn't work, Lulit?
Yeah, for this solution.
What's ironic about you saying that, Joe, is I feel like we've been saying the same thing for, our entire careers, long before EK. You said that about search. I remember 20 years ago. And it's interesting because, as Lulit said earlier, this is not a technology problem, right? This really is about the foundational design. It's about understanding the business, understanding the users, understanding what they want to get, the answers they want to get out of whatever it is as quickly and easily as possible, and then building the appropriate elements so that it is able to do that and then flexible enough to do the questions that you have not yet predicted.
Lulit, there was a term that you mentioned, and I'd really like to explore this more. I think it's kind of it's such an important component in this kind of practice. You talked about competency questions. And so I have some background working in knowledge graphs, and even within that community, competency questions are very powerful, but not as broadly understood or used as I would hope. Can you describe more? What does this mean? And then I think there's another point to this that I want to bring in a little bit later. But first off, let's get a good definition for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have a template for this in the book, like how you get to a competency question. But the core of it is in the software space, for those who are coming from that space, or in the agile space, there is a user story or use case that you would want to define what you're doing and what the purpose of what is it as a persona or the machine or the human that's going to use this. You want to be able to do insert function and then the why, so that you can describe the solution. Competency questions take that a little bit further and actually allow us to ask specific things of the system in either a specific sequence or still maintaining the outcome. So if we're building a graph solution or a taxonomy, a competency question would be something like, what kind of paint did we use on this machine in 1956, right? Like, very specific. It allows you to say, as you can imagine, you can break this down into very many different domains. But the key thing about a competency question is it's focused on your knowledge assets, the entities that you would want to use to connect those knowledge assets, and the business problem you're looking to solve. So if it meets these kind of three requirements, then you can start designing. This is where the template comes in to say, what are the priority knowledge assets we want to pull from that relate to this? Which source systems do they sit in? Because in the enterprise world, there is 10 plus, if at a minimum, right? As you would imagine. So how do we prioritize the highest priority solutions to prove the case? So through competency questions, you kind of cut vertically across all the solution components, from the business problem to the model requirements to the source systems and knowledge assets that you need, and then maybe even be able to add how much of it you would want to automate, right? So kind of like it allows you to break down the problem into a solution and the outcome in a succinct manner, and in a way we think and talk about things as humans too. A lot of the value of competency questions is those aha moments for leadership or stakeholders in a room when they are, oh, I didn't know we are able to answer that question, right? Like that's being able to facilitate those discussions. Does that track with what you've seen too, Paco?
Oh, fantastic. And I love the analogy with user stories. I've always found that part of Agile was sort of like somebody scribbled a thing on the wall and everybody's like, yeah, we're going to do that someday. The user stories are such a crucial part. If you're working in test-driven design or other areas of Agile, but they're also really big. And what you've done is to break this down into understanding the assets, what entities are required, what the relationships are, really what the impact on the business is. It's a much, much more sophisticated model than this kind of vague placeholder that Agile had. And I'm curious, are organizations then taking those competency questions and reusing them in other ways beyond the design and like troubleshooting of the design phase?
Yeah, absolutely. The process goes like, we identify the competency questions, and you can almost picture, like you can highlight the entities and domains that we care about as an organization through those competency questions.
Yeah.
Then you map those to the assets, the typical knowledge assets you would use to answer these questions. So say you have a given risk that you're looking to manage, and it has corresponding issues, compliance rules, regulations, requirements, like 10, 20 things related to that rule. So being able to identify that kind of map, the 360 of like what is related in your domain. This is an example for financial risk, for instance. If you have this type of risk, what are the regulations, the controls, the issues that you have resolved in the past, the standard policies and procedures for executing the rules, the universe related to a given risk, right? So it kind of triggers this model of, we identify the question, what are the entities, the corresponding assets, and then take that from there. That's how it helps with the full design process end to end to an actual machine readable model or a graph in the sense.
I can imagine that this would be useful for, say, training. Like once these capabilities are in place, there is a need to socialize this across the organization to help educate people who would be working with this, that these capabilities even exist. And it seems like the competency questions would probably be, I'm thinking about writing a syllabus for a class, but you usually have those top level bullet points that you're trying to bring in the people to sign up your course for. It seems like this is something you need as at the core of the training capabilities as well.
Paco, we want to change the way people think and act at an organization, right? So instead of thinking they have to have all the knowledge or hoard it or be the answer to everything, we want them to have a place to go that has the answer. And I think those competence questions, what you just suggested, is a good way to highlight. You can ask a very difficult question, and instead of having to ask 20 people or find that developer in IT that can build a report in 2 months to give you the answer, you should expect to get a simple and easy answer from almost anything you ask, because we've now put in the rules in place and the tools in place to make it so that almost any question you ask can be answered. And you're now, you think of that freeness of information or almost democratization of information. It's out there for everyone. What a game changer that is for how people work.
Interesting. You really touched on something there. There's a paper that's recently out, if I'm pronouncing names correctly. This is by Jonas Gewendorfer out of Munich. I don't know if you've seen it. It's called Homo Semanticus, but it was an attempt to provide a kind of conceptual test. Right now, there's a lot of capabilities that are being offered saying, look how much knowledge we have available. And what Gewendorfer is saying is that really you want to be looking at semantic maturity as a capacity to hold meaning. And it's a very simple thing to say, but in the paper they kind of spell it out, and they go into a lot of areas that if you haven't done graduate level work in AI, probably aren't going to make a lot of sense. It's a lot of gobbledygook. But at the end of the day, it isn't just a matter of, oh my God, we've amassed all this amount of information. It's more a matter of, like, operationally, how much meaning can you hold within your team for what needs to happen right now? Because you could have the world presented to you, but if you can't make sense of it, you can't actually keep it in your head for the 30 seconds you need to make that decision, or the 30 days. That capacity to hold meaning is really the crux of it. And this is kind of a controversial paper, but can we go from academia to actually what you're seeing on the ground in enterprise? Is this something that plays out?
I mean, we hear that in a lot of places. I've heard. There was a study I read that talked about how people become more forgetful in their 40s and 50s, and it's not necessarily that they're.
I've heard that before. I forgot where I heard that.
It's not per se that their brains are.
I don't remember that. I've never heard that before.
There you go. No, but what they found the main problem was that you had so much in your mind on a regular basis that to add something new was hard. And it wasn't like your mind is limited into how much it can hold, but the more stuff there is there, the harder it is to retain what you need. So as you hit your 50s, et cetera, you start to forget names, you forget other things, and it's a lot. And I think we're finding, and we're enabling now, and this is in our 20s, this would be really cool if we're enabling an environment where the knowledge that a company has becomes freely available. The meaning and the tying together of all the information sources that really historically have been left as silos starts to pull things together so that you don't have to remember everything. You just have to go ask the system. And that can really, I see it as freeing people up to think about more important things.
This is also, there's an old Gardner statistic that I've been quoting for years that every 3 to 4 months in organizations, digital knowledge doubles. Yeah. And so the analogy that I would use is, there you go looking for a needle in a haystack. And then every 3 to 4 months, another haystack gets dropped on top of the pile. I think an effective semantic layer isn't just about connecting information. It's also about helping to remove the information that's there that is not valuable, that is old, obsolete, duplicate, near duplicate, but also just using the words that you care about, but not in the way that you care about using them. The intelligence to remove just kind of dumb search results, so to speak, and make it highly contextualized. I think this is going to be a bigger and bigger deal because we're just generating so much stuff now.
Yeah.
The sheer amount of knowledge being created is higher more than it ever has been. It's not just humans creating knowledge now, or not just humans creating data or information. It's also the machines doing it now. So we can do it on an exponential scale. There's got to be something to edit it down to its most valuable. And I think that's a lot of what we're talking about here.
And the thing about people losing track of names and having trouble memorizing because they're overloaded, In a way, it's a sign of aging, yeah. But in a way, it's also something you would expect and want because, as you get older, you have to worry about dropping off the kids at school and, do we get our taxes filed on time? Oh, there's that one thing the CPA is asking for. My parent, did they make their medical appointment? On and on and on. You gain more responsibilities. And I think organizations are seeing this as well in a way. As they mature, they're more subject to compliance. They've got a lot more diversity in terms of their global footprint and all the different aspects. Whether you're talking about just keeping track of the holidays in every different country, it's hard. But as you grow and mature, you gain complexities of responsibilities. So you would hope that there would have to be some kind of priority there, because otherwise you're going to be overwhelmed. I'm going to go back to my computer science geek nature. In operating systems, we have this notion of a working set, and it was something that was actually kind of hard to get to. It took decades to realize you actually need to forget some stuff. You need to actually just focus on a particular set of things that are important right now, and all the rest of it we'll put up someplace else that'll be a little bit more expensive to go after, because we don't need to go after it all the time. And that was kind of a breakthrough. And it's something that, people do. I guess my question, though, would be, are you engaging with clients in terms of, is there a training component to this? Do they need to learn how to think this way? Or is that part of your practice to help them realize that?
I'll start off on this one. There are a couple of ways I would think about this, Paco, because you're saying a few things that I think are really important to pull out. First, about the training aspect. I think a mark of success for solutions that are intuitive is that you don't need training for the end user.
Oh, interesting.
That's the first part. And because especially semantic solutions, it's in the word, is the way we think about the world. It's a lens into our organizations. For end users, I think it's a failure if you have to train them how to use the system.
Okay.
That's, I would say, the first thing. The second layer to this is there is certainly training required for the people who are the administrators. And we talk about this in the book as well, that need to, what we've been talking about, learn the skills of how to do like hardcore semantic standards, RDF, OWL, SHACL, SCAS, these very standards-based semantic modeling capabilities that require actual skill sets that people graduate for, right? Like to learn and to acquire. That is a required skill set. However, that's something that we've actually been simplifying through over the past, 2017, 2018 timeframe through Knowledge Graph University, where we have, and you've seen us do the Semantic Layer Symposium workshops, through workshops and through training,
right.
That we have tried to simplify to a point where we have actually helped our clients learn how to start maintaining and managing the systems over time and develop the skill sets through certifications and through the actual training that's required. So there's an aspect of that training. But from a leadership and consumption perspective, training required is a failure. I would say that. The other aspect of this that I would call out in light of some of the, how much meaning can you hold? What is the prioritization process? Actually, the first step is to be able to say, what is a semantic layer problem and what is not? Because there is a lot of business and a lot of misunderstanding involved into the solution. The first question we actually go through the exercise with competency questions is, this is not a semantics problem. This is a machine learning problem. You need to figure out how to do your calculations and algorithms and recommendations. However, here is where you come to the taxonomy for meaning or classification. Here is where you come to. So like that solution flow architecture is a big part. That conceptual design of where do you come for what for the semantic layer is a big part of the piece of the puzzle that I think I see a lot of organization trip up on, or when we come in and looking at what worked and what hasn't, we see where the issues are.
Fantastic. One question I have, I live near Silicon Valley, and I hear a lot of narratives coming out of Silicon Valley about, again, going back to the magic 8-ball analogy of products that just kind of do everything, but it's a very closed system. It's a very opaque kind of process. It's where you're relying on some vendor to just take care of all the problems for you. I don't believe that really happens in practice. So it seems that in a lot of ways, what you're talking about is working with your client to kind of unravel, deconstruct this notion of a one-size-fits-all black box, so to speak. Could you talk a bit more about what you're seeing in this aspect?
Yeah, Paco, I'll get started, and I'm sure Lulit can add to this. We're seeing, and we've come in after some of these products have been implemented, that, oh, by the way, they dynamically figure out the knowledge graph to make it work. And all of a sudden, they look great, and they look great for about a month. And then you start asking the harder questions. And then all of a sudden, it doesn't work. And honestly, if you think about it, and if you press these vendors,
yeah,
it's typically one of two answers. They're reading your content to dynamically figure out who and what you are, right, based on your content.
Okay.
The flow with that is, for any large organization, over 2, 3, 5 years, what you've written changes a lot in how you describe yourself.
Yeah.
Do you really want to be reliant upon what you wrote 2 years ago as a description of what your organization does? I know we don't.
Yeah.
Right. So if that's the approach, that's not likely to be very accurate. And then the other one that we see all the time is they say, oh no, we have an industry standard ontology that we're using for you. And again, that maybe makes a little more sense. But to me, what makes companies special isn't how they're like everyone else in their industry. It's how they're different.
Right.
And so getting the tool that makes you like everyone else isn't really going to highlight the information that makes you different and special and get that to the team. So this concept of this black box is going to auto-tune itself based on industry standards or what it's reading from your content. It doesn't survive a couple simple questions, not to mention the competency questions that Lulit brought up earlier.
Oh, it's this kind of revision to the mean, and that is not a solution that does not distinguish for a given enterprise.
Now we talk about versus the black box that you mentioned, Paco, the glass box, and that's what the semantic layer really is.
Okay,
that you can see the definitions, you can see the connections, you can see the knowledge assets that were leveraged to provide the answer. And I think about like my own career, early taxonomy design days, I spent a year facilitating conversations with executives just to agree on what the meaning of the word product was within their organization. We work with one organization across the globe. They had 7 different methods of calculating revenues.
Yeah.
And so even the most basic concepts, what's a product? How much money did we make? Aren't doable, aren't achievable with a black box. You've got to be able to have control over what words mean, how they connect to each other, how you calculate your business, not a business, but your business. That's the big difference. That's the glass box. That's semantic layer in a nutshell.
And by your business, you also mean your business unit, like within an enterprise.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
Even more so. And that's a great example, right? Because you don't want to have to force your organization to align completely on a thing. By saying your business unit, you get to say, okay, well, I sit in this part of the organization. So when I ask the question, I mean this. And for the tool to be smart enough to recognize where you sit in asking and answering the question.
Joe, also the enumeration you had for how this kind of black box approach, how and where they fail. I think that this is really crucial. I think that a lot can be learned from seeing this. In terms of how can we evolve practices that are much more proactive. And I think that this strikes also, you mentioned about competency questions. I think it also strikes to an area that I share a lot of interest in, along with my friend and colleague David Hughes, working in enterprise knowledge, this notion of really working with AI applications through a process of observability and optimization loops, building out the feedback loops. So if we have a team of machines and people collaborating, where are the feedback loops where they're learning from each other? Lulit, to your point earlier, that it's a two-way street in a lot of different places. I think the eval questions that you're surfacing through this process are, I have a hunch, going to be so important downstream in ways that we really don't quite imagine yet, but we're starting to get a glimpse of. So as an example, one of the hardest areas in AI currently is how do you articulate the evaluations? If a machine is doing something, coming up with some kind of answer, how can you come back and say, is it good or bad? Other than just having an army of people watching every decision and giving a thumbs up, thumbs down. Is there some way that we can go about this that is more effective and more cost effective, especially? And this is where we get to this notion of evaluations. And so if you have feedback loops, you have to have, getting back to the notion of like user stories, you have to have something that's, very important qualitatively, but also quantitatively. How can we really make a decision? And the competency questions really feed into that. But again, I think it's so important with semantic layer that it's not just a matter of having, your MLOps person decide. It's a matter of having this particular attorney who specialized in that particular region and what their compliance laws are. So I'm curious about that evaluation loop and how you're seeing this be deployed in organizations. Am I looking too far ahead, or is this something happening now?
I would say this is actually where we are talking about the last chapter of the book, kind of looking ahead in terms of continuous learning, adaptive leadership, and how organizations are updating their overarching operating models to support this future that it's no longer the future, it's happening right now. We have quite a few of these projects happening, but where the semantic layer kind of bridges into the next phase of how this extends to the context layer, context graphs, and how you can start seeing the biggest shift is around your question around evaluation. The metrics that are more measurable and where you can reinforce learning, you can go to traditional machine learning models, right? Where you give it a parameter, it does this multiple times, good, bad. That's more deterministic in a way.
Yeah.
But the biggest shift and the hardest thing, I would say, and I don't know if you're seeing this, is how you can incentivize that continuous learning without taking too much time from your subject matter experts. And this is actually where we're seeing the traditional roles of data stewards and knowledge managers shifting into, as the knowledge stewards and the validators, at least on a few of the projects that we're seeing, it's kind of creating this layer of people who know how this process works. So it's not a lot of time on the domain experts and the subject matter experts, but more about what is right from overarching solution perspective. So GraphRack solutions spit out something.
Yeah.
They give us their what we would call it kind of like a sample gold source data as a proxies to subject matter experts. So that's one area I'm actually very excited to see how evolutions of roles are carrying within the organizations, especially for traditional data and KM stewards. So that's one shift that we're seeing. Okay. The other piece to this is these AI councils and within the leadership when it comes to the working with AI and adaptive leadership that we talk about in the book. That's exactly what it is. It is leadership starting to accept and to manage around the fact that this is not a deterministic solution. Results may vary. So how do you get that threshold of comfort in light of your risk threshold for a given competency question versus another? So it's being able to define as part of the competency question. You take it further down to how are we going to evaluate this? Do we have the same threshold for the perfect response? If so, then it needs to be rules-based as much as possible, right? So even being able to kind of start separating this out. This is the design process that we're taking to using semantic layer AI solutions, and then how do we evaluate the output, and who evaluates the output, the operating model, the future of like looking ahead that we talk about in the book as well.
I want to magnify something Lulit just said. A lot of folks are talking about AI governance, saying like, well, it's going to depend on the organization and their threshold for risk. But Lulit said something really critical there. With the semantic layer, it's not at an organizational level, it's at a topical level, where you're saying, given the types of questions that you're asking and you want answered, there can be different willingness or different thresholds of accuracy or completeness. And that level of granularity, A, the power of the semantic layer, but B, how these things get put together, I think is really, really important for an organization to understand. They don't need to say, this is our governance, it is one size fits all. Right. It can actually be based on the various types of questions and topics of information that people are seeking.
Right. So that seems, and that turns it into a lot more of a risk management game. I mean, understanding, being able to quantify, really making decisions that are informed based on the tolerance of risk for a given application, for a given context. Interesting. It just strikes me that what we've been talking about here is meeting the moment so directly and almost prescient. I would definitely use that word, prescient. You started this process a while ago, so I was curious about, what was kind of the spark that started this out? How did you get to such a prescient point?
So Lulit deserves just a ton of credit on this. This is she had told the first half of the story at the beginning of this, but this actually goes back to 2023. In the fall of 2023,
okay,
she came to Joe and I, and she said, "There's a moment here. These worlds are all coming together: data and content, taxonomy, ontology, and also business glossary was traditionally, at least for us, left out of being the three semantic components." And so she said, we need to ensure that we are at the front of this conversation, that we're defining these terms, that we're really setting the stage for what's to come. And recognize that 2023, this is pre-AI revolution. This is before anybody was talking about semantic layers. And so the three of us, as well as practice leader for semantic engineering, Sarah Nash, did an offsite. In January 2024, we went away and we thought both strategically and tactically about what we could do to shape the conversation before the conversation started. And you'll see, if you go back to our knowledge base, we started writing a bunch of blogs around semantic layer at that point. We started the Semantic Layer Symposium, the conference that Lulit mentioned earlier. But we also said, kind of boldly at that point, hey, let's write the book. And so it goes all the way back to that. And I just want to, really say to Lulit, wow. I mean, to look at how people are talking about this today and to think about where we are now, thank you. I did not want to write another book, so no thank you, but also.
Well, congrats on that, Lulit. I mean, it really, it's striking because I think at that point in time, a lot of people were playing with DALL-E 2, maybe generating images. ChatGPT probably, this was before ChatGPT even came out.
No, ChatGPT, I think, pushed 3.0 was, I think, November. Okay. We were dealing with 2.0 in 2018, 2017 timeframe that I was talking about earlier. It was slightly painful, right. But, it was for a cause. We've come a long way, but that was before enterprises actually started adapting it. The co-pilots had come out and, all the pieces. So a little bit earlier before all of that.
Fantastic. You mentioned also an event, Semantic Layer Symposium, and I'm grateful I got to participate last year in Copenhagen and give a talk. Really love that. This year, can you tell us a bit more about what's going on? What's on the docket?
Well, so first of all, you're being humble. You keynoted it last year, as well you should have. But yeah, we're going to Vienna this year, one of our favorite cities, so that may be a little bit of selfishness in that. But I think we've got a really great lineup of organizations. Let's see, we've got folks from Morgan Stanley, Adobe, Roche Pharmaceuticals, amongst others, presenting this year. And what's really cool about it is that this is now our third year. And the first year, we really spent all of our energy saying, what's the semantic layer? And half the participants were actively taking notes as we were defining the terms and concepts. And then last year was a lot about, well, here's a pilot I've run, and organizations were showing up, really sharing what they'd done, but also what hadn't worked. What's going to be neat about this year is that the case studies, the organizations speaking, are going to be sharing how they've moved this to the enterprise. So in 3 short years, we went from what is it to I've tried and some things have worked and some things haven't, to look at what I've realized from a perspective of hard ROI for my organization. And if that doesn't tell the story in a nutshell, I don't know what does.
Yeah, it's those reference points are so key. I mean, again, going back to my neighbor, Silicon Valley, new stuff comes out every day or every week or whatever. It's just such a rapid pace. But in enterprise, you really have to understand that other people are doing this thing that's being talked about. And here's the experience they've had. Here's the ROI. Here's the risks. These are the common trouble points. This is what you've been mapping out. And it doesn't happen overnight. But the fact that it happened within 3 years is amazing. I usually look at J-curve analysis and that kind of thing happening on the order of like 12 to 15 years. So again, congrats on that. I think this team has again been prescient, but really understanding the insights and how the pieces fit together. So I would encourage everybody to go to Semantic Layer Symposium because I'm super keen on finding out what this team comes up with next and shows us points out for us to be looking at.
Well, and Paco, I again want to thank you. You wrote the foreword for this book, and I learned what the acronym FAFO stands for as a result of reading your foreword. So if that doesn't entice everybody to check it out, I don't know what else to say. But you're somebody I've learned so much from, and I love a combination, the Venn diagram of extreme expertise and kindness and humility. You're just one of the best ones out there, and just really, really appreciate you. So thank you for doing this for us. It was really, really fun.
Thank you kindly, Zach. I will close by saying something that I actually closed the forward on. It's like, this is a way of becoming the future you want to see, that you want to be part of. I really love the inflection point that we're at right now, or really maybe we're beyond the inflection point. I love the moment that we're at right now, where so much can be done. And I am so impressed with how your practice is, yes, embracing the technology, but also putting a very human feel on it too, and bringing out the human components. I want to thank you for that, and really appreciate the discussion today.
Thank you, Paco. And to our listeners, thanks for joining this very special episode of KnowledgeCast. To check out more, visit our website at enterprise-knowledge.com. And to buy a copy of the new book, go to Amazon or wherever fine books on semantics are sold. Thanks all.